Hey everyone, welcome back. Hope you had a good weekend. I saw some of you still continuing to reflect on the learning that we've been doing for the last little while. It brings me into this week, and one of the things that is really important for us to think about as we do the work of inclusive design is to really understand our role as educators in light of the truth and reconciliation calls to action. When we think about the fact that schools were designed as part of the design of schooling, through colonization, it was to destroy indigenous identity. And so schools were systematically used as a tool for genocide. And what that means is that, it becomes really important for us as we do work to address inequities that we understand that there's significant distinctions in the work that we do to support indigenous students and families. It is not the same as equity work. I remember sitting once with Dr. Duke Redbird, and he was sharing with me. He said, indigenous people do not want equity with white people. They want self-determination and governance, which is their right, because as nations that signed nation-to-nation agreements, it is something that we are actually obligated to make sure happens. Unfortunately, our governments, and definitely by default, our schools are not geared towards that. And so it becomes really, really important for us to think about how it is that we make sure in our roles, wherever we are, in classrooms and schools, as superintendents, as professors, how are we doing the work of truth and reconciliation? For far too long, this country has gone ahead and relegated indigenous people to even, the living in conditions that we would not even want to dream about. And most cases, if you were to get to places and nations, reserves where indigenous people are, couple hours drive, it is horrendous in terms of what is happening there. When indigenous children come into schools, just by virtue of walking into a school, I want for us to think about how much resiliency that actually requires when schools were used to destroy families, to destroy indigenous identity, languages, cultures, traditions. What we have to think about is what is our duty with regards to that. There is so much that we need to take direction from indigenous leaders and educators so that we can know and do things in the right way. And there's also the work that we need to do when we think about equity as a leadership competency, specifically tied to truth and reconciliation. So, what's the work that we need to do? What's the learning that we need to do? And in your positions of responsibility, how are you going to disrupt things? I mean, an easy one from the place of instruction is we're still teaching about Columbus and the doctrine of discovery. No one discovered a place where up to 80 million people were living already. How do you discover that? You can visit it, but these are the myths that were perpetuated in order to create a particular narrative. With regards to how we do school improvement, what is the specific work that we're doing tied to indigenous students? With regards to superintendents, what does that look like for us in terms of how we specifically check in on the relationships that we're building with the nations that are around us, or the relevant elders and bodies that are significant to helping to make sure that those voices are present, and making sure that the learning is coming from elders, from indigenous authors, writers, teachers, even in terms of how things are conceptualized. And so those are just some of the things that I want us to think about as we grapple with today's question. And let's think about it out loud and be honest and share what we need to do or how far we still need to go.